Metaphor Refantazio is the latest RPG from the masterminds behind Persona 5. Leading the newly established Studio Zero is director Katsura Hishino, who is responsible for many of the spin-off and sequel games for both Shin Megami Tensei and Persona. Following him is a few creatives from P Studio who primarily focused on the development of Persona from the third installation onwards. If you love Persona 5, then Metaphor Refantazio is bound to catch your eye, with its vibrant art, catchy tunes, and distinct approach to modern fantasy. But don't be fooled, Metaphor isn't just Persona 5 and medieval garb. While both games tackle grand themes of self-discovery and have that classic Atlust flair, Metaphor shifts from high school life and urban jungle metaphors to an epic fantasy world packed with kingdoms, mysteries, and monsters. Imagine the philosophical depth of Persona meeting the scale and grandeur of Final Fantasy, and you're getting close to what Metaphor has to offer. My one and only gripe with this game though is the developer's decision to continue using Atlust's proprietary engine, the GFD engine, which was first used for Persona 5, which released in 2016. I can assume that they did try to upgrade the engine a bit, since it'll be 8 years old by now when they were developing Metaphor, but still, the graphics look extremely dated, like it was being developed for the PS3. Seeing the desert biomes and the grasslands, as well as the dungeons and towers that we ran through, it all looks extremely dated and unappealing. What's more frustrating is when you're fighting enemies in the open world, the attack and dodge mechanics feel clunky and unrefined. You can easily get locked into an attack animation only to completely miss your target as you both awkwardly slide past each other. This often leaves you wide open, giving the enemies the perfect chance to land a hit and potentially ambush you. And in this game, ambushes can be brutal. Enemies can stack ailments and dish out significant damage before you even get a turn to react. Now sure, you can argue that this is primarily a turn-based RPG and that the overall combat is just there to stun enemies, clear out weaker mobs, and you'd be right. But if the game is going to include an action-based combat system, then it should feel more polished and cohesive. Whether it was due to engine limitations or just a lack of development time, this aspect, along with the visuals, feels like it needed more time to cook. That said, despite these issues, I still consider this one of the best video games I've played this year. It's a testament to the fact that stunning graphics aren't everything. What truly makes a great game is the experience it delivers.
Oh, faint subtle child, oh thou who art seared with bitterness, oh lodestar who wanders in solemn duty.
I am the last of my house, I am the last of my noble bloodline, and in the name of my people, I will strike you down where you stand!
Knight, I am commander, and last of the honor guard!
Unlike the montage-style opening cutscenes we often see in other games, Metaphor Refantazio pulls us straight into its story from the get-go. Right away, we're hit with some pretty dark themes: bribery, racism, and even regicide, all unfolding before we even get to the main menu. It's a bold and shocking introduction, setting the tone for what's to come. We're immediately introduced to the villain and begin to get a glimpse into the twisted logic that drives his actions. From there, the story follows Will and Gallica on their mission to break a curse that has left the prince in a comatose state. To do so, they're tasked with tracking down and killing the man responsible for the king's murder. As the journey unfolds, we meet Stroll, a Clemar and former noble, and Hulkenberg, a Rusant and ex-Kingsguard. Together, this unlikely band of heroes venture forth into the world, teeming with mystery, political themes, and deep philosophical struggles. This game doesn't shy away from heavy topics like racial discrimination imposed by the higher class tribes on those of the low-born tribes. You'll travel across the continent, encountering people from every walk of life, working to earn their trust and aiding them in their struggle.
You son of a bitch.
And of course, it's not all diplomacy. You'll face rivals, monstrous creatures, and perhaps most unsettling of all, the humans. These grotesque amalgamations of objects fused with human-like features are equal parts horrifying and fascinating. Interestingly, these nightmarish beings are inspired by the surreal macabre art of Hieronymus Bosch, a medieval Dutch painter known for his haunting otherworldly imagery. To help us take on these monsters, we eventually unlock the power of archetypes. this game's version of Personas, which also doubles as its class change system. With this newfound power in hand, we set out to save the country. Overall, the story was incredible. The characters felt fully fleshed out, each with their own struggles, hopes, and dreams. They weren't just placeholders, they had distinct personalities that set them apart from each other. You could feel the raw emotion radiating from them, making every interaction memorable.
Is this the price of my failure then? The prince, for having lost him, you too would abandon me. Why did you leave me alone in the dark when you escaped with his highness? I have sought him for so many years to no avail, and now I... Of course. 'Tis only just that you be the one to send me to him now.
Get up! Fight!
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
The twist in the stories genuinely caught me off guard at times, keeping me on the edge of my seat. Even when I thought I had things figured out, the narrative threw curveballs that left me pleasantly surprised. As for the lore, while it leans on some familiar fantasy tropes, it's presented in a way that feels refreshing and engaging. The rich history of the world and its characters pulled me in, making me eager to uncover more about their struggles, culture, and the events that shape their reality. By the time the credits rolled, I was absolutely satisfied with the conclusion. It tied everything together in a way that felt earned and meaningful. Major kudos to the writing team for crafting such an emotional and captivating story. One thing I didn't enjoy was the lack of voice acting in most of the game, especially during side missions. I played with the English dub and the voice actors were fantastic. It's just a shame that they didn't get more opportunities to shine. Instead, we're left with a lot of dialogue delivered through plain text chat boxes, accompanied by a character portrait and a random sound, a grunt, a sigh, a phrase that often doesn't even match what they're saying.
In those days,
If you ever played a gacha game like Honkai Star Rail, then you know what I'm talking about. To make matters worse, the characters' animations during these sequences were almost non-existent. They repeat the same static posture over and over, which made it hard to stay engaged, and I found myself skimming through some of the dialogue simply because the presentation wasn't captivating enough. And that's disappointing because, honestly, the side stories themselves are really good. On the flip side, the cutscenes are a completely different story. They're fantastic. The 3D animated cutscenes bring the world to life with varied movements and facial expressions that convey genuine emotion. And the 2D anime cutscenes, easily my favorite parts of the game. Sure, the CG archetypes can look a bit awkward at times, but they're still visually impressive overall. Portrait-based chat boxes are not the way to deliver engaging side stories or intermediate content. I get it, time and budget constraints are always a factor, but there has to be a better way to present these narratives in a way that keeps the players invested.
I'll be damned. Someone actually survived.
that voice.
Metaphor is a turn-based RPG with an additional layer of overworld action combat. The system allows you to either stun enemies for an advantage in squad battles or instantly kill weaker foes. When it comes to complexity, Metaphor doesn't hold back. The variety of enemies you face is staggering. Each one feels distinct, with unique weaknesses and resistance that keeps you on your toes. Especially bosses. They stand out. They're not just tougher enemies, but entirely new challenges that demand strategy and adaptability. One feature I really liked was the informant in the town. For some mysterious reason, this person knows all the weaknesses of every boss and the mechanics of each dungeon, and this lets you plan your party, your formation, your strategy, even before stepping foot into the dungeon. I found myself taking the time to reorganize my archetypes, adjust inherited skills, and stock up on gear and items I would need for the big fight. That said, preparation in this game really does matter. I really appreciated this emphasis on that strategy, even though it could be punishing at times. Forget a key item for a dungeon mechanic, you're gonna feel the impact. However, one gripe I have is the lack of a soft or hard reset to the main menu during boss fights. If you need to restart, you have to Alt F4 and reboot the game entirely. This becomes especially frustrating if you enter a battle and realize you forgot to tweak something in your archetypes or equipment. Just let us soft reset. It's not that hard. On the bright side, uncovering weaknesses for new enemies is pretty satisfying. The first fight against a new foe is a test run where you get to try different attacks to figure out their vulnerabilities. Afterward, there's an option to restart the battle from the beginning. And the best part, you get to keep the information you uncovered without wasting MP. Speaking of MP, that's another area where the game kind of stumbles depending on who's playing it. I had an issue with it. Outside of rare MP recovery items, there's no reliable way to restore mana except for the hero passive that the mage tree gives that grants a tiny amount back after killing enemies in the overworld. This effectively limits your time in the dungeons, which I assume the developers wanted to do, as once you run out of MP, you're forced to return to town to rest before continuing. This only bothers me because the game runs on a limited day system before the next deadline, and if you have to waste another day just to fully clear dungeons, then that may set you back when it comes to increasing follower bonds, royal virtues, or whatever else you wanted to do. This design led me to change how I approach dungeons. Instead of exploring them naturally, I'd beeline straight to the boss while my team was fresh, defeat it, then teleport back to the entrance to properly explore the dungeon afterwards. While this strategy worked, it felt unintuitive and took away from the sense of adventure that you would normally get in a dungeon. I'm not sure what implications would be of allowing MP recovery in resting rooms, but perhaps adding more MP recovery items would strike a better balance. Just a thought. Okay, but can I talk about something else that really annoyed me? Galaga doesn't shut up. Get hit with an ailment, Galaga's on it. Missed your attack, she's got something snarky to say. Low on health, she'll definitely remind you repeatedly. Party member down, Galaga won't stop nagging you until you join them.
You hit their weakness! Hulkenberg, your attack power's dropped! Stroll's combat power is down! Hulkenberg's battle power is down! Someone heal her! Stroll's
The freedom of a
power is
wanderer.
down! Hello! Hey! Listen!
Look, I love Galaga. She's a fantastic character. But holy hell, does she need to backseat us in every single battle? Just let me do what I do. Let me suffer. I got it. I understand they're hurt. Not every situation needs an interjection. If my character is burned but the enemy's about to die, let me ignore it. I'll cure it when I'm good and ready. I don't know what it is with developers and these overly talkative companions. Why do they think we need non-stop commentary like we're incapable of basic decision making? Sure, maybe I am dumb. And I do need a reminder every now and then, but this is too much. Dungeons. Dungeons are way too linear. Take the towers, for example. They're 8 circular floors with a single room and some walls. It's bland, boring, uninspired. Sure, they're short and that makes farming easier, but come on, they're practically empty. On top of that, dungeons are graphically unimpressive, while the overall journey gives us pit stops with stunning vistas like floating islands, colossal crimson trees, an ocean split apart creating a static wall. They don't capitalize on these awe-inspiring locations. Instead of letting us explore them, it's like the developers just slapped the concept art and said, look how cool it is. Okay, back to the plain lifeless towers for another few hours. Now, the menu system. This is a nightmare of endless scrolling. I'm sure they did this with console players in mind using controllers, but look, you need to change an accessory, prepare to wade through everything you ever picked up because there's no categorization in the equipment menu. Got a ton of loot? Too bad. Time to scroll for an eternity to find that one item you need. You know what they could have added? A button to denote what you want to trash. So when you go to a shop, you can just dump all the trash at the same time instead of having to go through the menu and trying to figure out what you can sell at that point in time. The equipment shop is equally frustrating. You barely get any useful information when comparing gear. Sure, it shows basic stats like defense and maybe the effect the gear has, which is important, but what about the attributes? Does it boost agility, magic, endurance? High chance you were using a lower defense piece on that character because it boosted magic by a ton. But unless you remember that, you won't have a way of knowing until you back out of the shop screen and dive into the equipment menu. And also, teleporting. It's kind of painful. The town map is another scrolling maze. Want to visit a specific shop, gotta scroll through the whole menu, through the clunky, chunky menu to find it. A better solution, just let us select a major hub and teleport directly to the icons on the map. Is that too hard? Too much scrolling, it's driving me insane. It's driving me clinically insane. It might sound like I had a lot of issues with this game than positive things to say, but here's the thing. Even with all its flaws, I still found myself wanting to come back for more. I played 80 hours of this game. That to me speaks volumes of how incredible the game truly is. Alright, and that was just my first playthrough. In fact, I can confidently say that this is one of the best games I've ever played. So good, in fact, that I can see myself playing another 80 hours in the future. I've always loved turn-based games, but this one stood out with its depth. The combat system offered so many layers of strategy, and it wasn't just about picking the strongest attack, but carefully planning your party's synergy, adapting to the enemy's weaknesses, and executing your strategy with precision. It made every encounter rewarding. On top of that, the grind was genuinely enjoyable. Whether it was farming for EXP or hunting for rare items, I loved the satisfaction of building my team to be an unstoppable force. There's something so exhilarating about rolling up to the final boss decked out in legendary gear and unleashing a spell that deals massive damage. It's moments like these that reminds me of why I love RPGs. But what truly sets this game apart were the characters. They weren't just tools for combat, they felt alive. The stories were so deeply fleshed out that I found myself fully invested. I laughed with them, I cried with them, celebrated their victories alongside them. It felt like I wasn't just playing a game, I was sharing in their journey. For all its quirks and frustrations, this game gave me an unforgettable experience. And that's something I'll always cherish. So what is Metaphor Refantazio? It's joy, it's sadness, it's frustration, but most importantly, it's good.
From here on, thy path is thy own. Choose thy own future for thyself, and may the fates smile on thy journey.